Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Thursday session. Each Thursday here at 5:30 with Metabolic Studio for Learning and Mending. We're really happy to have you here. I can kick it off with a special feature embroidery of the week. This is very beautiful. It's by Martha Wilhelm. It's a California poppy. And I love that it's not just the flower, but the bud stage of the flower too. Let me shine a little extra light on the subject. Really incredible detail. And as I was looking through the archives trying to figure out which one to feature tonight, I noticed that Martha Wilhelm has a lot of them in there. So she's finished off. She's a prolific embroiderer. And she had a little note in her folder that I thought it would be fun to read. She says, this is her little note, "I so enjoyed this and I aim to do another soon. Great project, great circle. Fondly, Martha Wilhelm, mother of Cascade." So I thought that was a nice shout out that she gave to our group here, and I was happy to feature it. So we're just gonna go around and introduce ourselves, say our names and where we're calling in from, our pronouns, and what we're working on here tonight. So I'll go ahead and start us off. I'm Emily, and I'm here in Echo Park, and my friend Allison is actually here too. She's embroidering one of the mule fat kits, which is very exciting. And I'll be helping out with the screen share and doing a little bit of hosting. And I will pass it off to Rowena.
Hello, I'm Rowena. I'm calling in from Mid-City, LA. I use she, her pronouns, and I will be working on an embroidery of, I think it's exchange of CO2. I have to find it, but as soon as I get it, I will be enjoying working on that one. And I will pass it to Douglas.
Hello, my name is Douglas Lee. I'm in from Los Angeles, California, and my pronouns are by he, I guess. But you know, honestly, I'm he and a she. We're everything in the universe, so I firmly believe that. And so there you go. I'm gonna pass it over to Dee.
Hi, Derainer, calling in from Baldwin Hills, California. I go by she, her pronouns, and I am working on a native sunflower pollinator still. I will finish soon, and I'm happy to be here tonight for week 3. Excited for tonight's reading. And I will pass it on to, who's next on my screen? Lauren.
Thanks, Dee. Hi, I'm Lauren using she, they pronouns. I'm in Chicago. I'm working on mycelium plant exchange. And I will pass it on to, well, it's got to be Walker in a different background today.
Hi, everyone. Yep, I'm calling in from LA, and I use she, they pronouns, and I am working on this blank piece of paper. I think I left my embroidery in Mexico, so I'm gonna draw a picture of a bison. And I'm gonna hand it over to, I can't see Kavi. Kavi. Did I say that?
Yeah, thanks, Walker.
I
Covey
don't have my
calling,
glasses on, I can't see.
Covey calling in from Sacramento, California. Use he, him pronouns. I'm looking forward to reading along with the text. It really helps with my comprehension. I can't do anything else while to listening along. So looking forward to reading with you all, and I'll pass it over to Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm over here in Alhambra. I use she, her pronouns and excited to listen in tonight. And I will pass it to, how about Aaron?
Hello. My name's Aaron. I'm at Metabolic Studio in Los Angeles, California, and looking forward to tonight's reading. I'll be having some snacks and working on whatever. I haven't decided yet, but getting into the next phase of the day. So I will pass it on to Olan.
Thank you, Erin. I'm Olan. I use she, her pronouns. I'm in Los Angeles. I'm working on the mycelium carbon exchange that won't show up on here. I'm working on that. There it is. Gone. Anyhow, believe me, many stitches in here. And I'll pass it on to Linda Gass.
Hi, I'm Linda. I'm calling in from Los Altos, in the San Francisco Bay Area. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm going to be working on a digital design on my iPad for a commission I'm working on. And I will pass this along to, let's see, Stefano.
Hi everyone, Stefano from El Sereno. I'm excited to be here for the third episode of the Bison and Mending. And I'm gonna pass it on to, let's see, who hasn't gone yet? Michelle. Voila.
Good evening, I'm Michelle. I'm from El Sereno as well. Tonight I'll be working on, I'm not sure what it is. It's some kind of evolving cell structure. And my pronouns are he, they, them. And I will pass it to someone in here, Andrea, who just joined in.
Hello, everyone. Drea here. I go by she, her pronouns in Los Angeles. I got to start on the Buffalo last week, and I like how it's going already. So excited to continue doing that. And shall I keep passing? Cindy, have you gone yet?
I haven't gone. My name's Cindy. I'm calling in from West Covina today, and I have my Buffalo kit, and I'll start that a little later. I'm happy to be here, and I think, oh, maybe Sylvia hasn't gone unless Emily's taking it back.
Hi, this is Sylvia. I'm in Pasadena, California. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm working on dishes and laundry. And I'm grateful. Thank you. I'm going to pass it along to Andrea.
Oh, I think I just went. So how about James?
Hi, everybody. I'm James calling in from Los Angeles. I am in the garden and I am transferring some cider I made, and I will be weeding while listening. I will pass it to Kavi.
I've gone. I'll pass it to. I actually don't know who's next. Emily or Cindy. Have you gone yet?
I can take it back unless, was someone else going to introduce themselves? Did Nance introduce themselves? No. Okay. Fair enough. All right. I'll take it back. I just need to pull up my introduction here. So please bear with me a moment. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. And just a reminder, if you can keep yourself muted during our reading, if you're not speaking or reading, that's super helpful. And here we are. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Learning and Mending. Since the pandemic began, Metabolic Studio has moved our weekly open studio practice to Zoom. In this 8th series of Learning and Mending, Bison and Range, we will look at the grassland ecozone that spans more than 180 million acres, stretching across the center of the North American continent from its northern tip to the wetlands that flow into the oceans, and see how this vast network of biologically diverse landscapes has been radically re-terraformed by the ideologies of manifest destiny, extractivism, capitalism, monocultural farming. Sorry, that's my place. Monocultural farming and the colonization of the commons of soil, water, and seed. To honor the bison, we have a new embroidery designed by Michel Breard. We are happy to add to our collection, and if you would like one of these or one of the other patterns we have to offer, please let us know at info@metabolicstudio.org. In this series, we explore the story of this landscape, commonly referred to as the Great Plains, and the symbiotic relationship the bison herds shared with this ecosystem over millennia, before being nearly exterminated by European settlers. The First Nations of this continent are still deeply connected with the epistemological interdependent web of life. And in this series, sorry, my dog is asking me to come up. And in this series, we will learn about the contemporary movement led by Indigenous people and their allies to bring the bison back to their range, while confronting systemic colonialism in its past and present forms. In this time of spring renewal, we come together to celebrate the deep knowledge of the herd, the biodiverse prairies of our continent, Indigenous wisdom and peoplehood, and continue to explore the systemic changes that are urgently needed for a more just and ecologically sane future. Olan Jones, Director of Overtone Industries, will conduct our participatory Zoom choir with sound artist Douglas Lee. They will direct us in a virtual choir through the silo we work with on the western boundary of the Great Basin each week during this series. This 6-week series is curated and led by Kelly Skye, an ecologist, artist, and PhD candidate at UC Santa Cruz. We will share our screen displaying the week's reading. Feel free to jump in and read aloud from the text as you feel inspired, as we welcome one and all to both listen and giving voice to the unique texts that we share each week. And with that, I will pass it over to my friend Kelly Skye to tell us a bit about tonight's reading.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So tonight we're gonna be learning a lot about the Yellowstone herd, some of the last wild herds. We'll start with a reading from Henry Reelbird, who we've read a poem from him before, and I just find him a really compelling character. He's a poet laureate from Montana and a member of the Crow tribe, and he's the one that rode a horse across the state handing out books of poetry. And he will share with us this account of an oral history about the disappearance and reemergence of the bison in the Montana region. And it's a really unique story, a lot of connections to references to natural forces like the sunrise, the moon, the wind, the snow. And I don't know, it's just interesting to hear how the story is put together in that way. And then we'll read a bit more from Winona LaDuke's book about the Yellowstone herd and the herd that's in Canada. And she introduces us to a really important figure named Rosalie Little Thunder, who, when I first came across Rosalie, I don't know what it was, but something really moved me about her presence and just the way she spoke and held herself and the work that she did. Rosalie passed away in 2014, but from the early 1990s to 2014, she was so dedicated to being a spiritual guardian and advocate for the Yellowstone herd. And you'll hear more about the challenges that herd faces. And it's actually, I come to find out, a very special herd because that area, the bison were never fully exterminated and then reintroduced like they were in a lot of other regions. So they have the lineage, the genetic lineage of this herd goes back to some of the more ancient wild bison of this continent. So it's a really special herd. And I just wanted to mention that today there is a couple intense sections in these readings, but I think it made me tear up at moments, but they're really important and they really help help me and hopefully all of us understand a really important contemporary issue for the bison. And at the very end, I found this amazing video that features Rosalie speaking, doing her walks that she organized for the bison, and it's just so nice to hear her voice and feel her presence. So I thought we could play that at the end to kind of process what we learned. It was helpful for me to see. And then I'm also really happy because Kavi has been doing great research about some of the most recent work and issues happening with the Yellowstone herd. So hopefully during discussion we can hear more from Kavi about his research. So that's what I have in store for tonight, and we can get started with the reading.
Thanks, Kelly, for that intro to this week's session. I'll just go ahead and pull up the screen share now. Oh, Cindy, can you enable me to share? Sorry, my fingers are not quite as nimble. That was an accident. One moment.
The disappearance and return of the buffalo. The Upsaulo Oupsaloka, Crow Indians, the ones who put rocks at the base of the teepee, or the ones who follow the buffalo, expected to always walk with the wolf on the trail of the buffalo to operate the buffalo jump. But the disappearance of the buffalo was shown through Plenty Coup, supernatural dream, which he had when fasting on a peak in the Crazy Mountains in present-day Montana during the summer of 1868. In the dream, Plenty Coup went to the head of Arrow, Pryor Creek Canyon, also in present-day Montana, where to the rising sun he looked as a massive herd of buffalo, thundering hooves shook and trembled the ground, Mother Earth. And while his heartbeat was with Mother Earth's in the rhythm of buffalo hoofbeats, the buffalo emerged from over the luscious, wait. I think I lost my place. Well, I'll start from in the dream, Plenty Coup went to the head of Arrow Creek Canyon, where to the rising sun he looked as a massive herd of buffalo, thundering hoofs shook and trembled the ground, Mother Earth, while his heartbeat was with Mother Earth's in the rhythm of buffalo hoof. I can't see where that goes. In the rhythm of buffalo hoofbeats, the buffalo emerged from over the luscious green horizon below the gold turquoises, the sun barely rising sky. Many buffalo engulfed the gentle slope, racing toward where it is winter all the time, turning to where the sun sets, then toward where it is warm all the time, and finally heading toward where the sun rises. When they headed toward where it is cold all of the time again, they all vanished, disappeared into a massive hole in the ground. From out of that hole in the ground emerged the spotted buffalo cattle, many to eat the buffalo grass. As the sun was rising, and from the center of the sun came so many light-eyed people using spotted buffalo to pull wagons. Wagons entered the plains, wandering towards the rivers and mountains. The dream moved on to a cluster of pine trees where many different kinds of birds were fluttering around, chattering and whistling. There were magpies, meadowlarks, hawks, ravens, robins, sage grouse, and many, many more. As they were busy making a lot of noise and flying around, a chickadee was quietly sitting on the branch of a pine tree when a big gust of wind knocked down all of the trees the many birds were sitting on, except for the pine tree with the little chickadee.
A spirit voice then said to Plenty Coots, "There it is. The buffalo will be no more, and the spotted buffalo will now eat the buffalo grass. The many lodges, teepees, moving camp on the trail of the buffalo will be gone forevermore. The big wind that knocked down all of the pine trees, except for the one pine tree and the chickadee was on is representative of the many light-eyed people who emerged from the morning sacred who emerged from the morning sacred sunrise. If you get rid of some of these people, many more will come. You have to learn to live with them. Be like the chickadee. Sit quietly and observe and learn from these light-eyed people. There it is. Tell your people the buffalo will disappear. The message of the buffalo forced the Upsaloka to move to the banks of the Mean River, Little Bighorn River, in 1883 in present-day Montana and Wyoming. After moving from Fort Parker, Mission Creek, Indian agencies wood frame houses on the Elk River to the Stillwater River, Beartooth Mountains, and Swift Current River, also locations in present-day Montana and Wyoming. We got off the trail of the buffalo to settle on the Little Bighorn, up from its mouth about 12 walks or miles. The days when the lodges used to move on the trail of the buffalo in rhythm with the movements of Mother Earth had ended. As the buffalo trails were gradually plowed under by the spotted buffalo, it seemed like all the buffalo were gone after the killing of the wild buffalo last seen on the big ridge toward where the sun rises, from where they cut the wood, Billings, Montana. But sometime after World War II, a large buffalo bull was killed toward the sunset from Crow Agency, Montana, up on the head of the Brush Coulee. "Let me butcher him, eat him up for the last time," said Bear Ground as he stripped down to his breechcloth. Then he held a knife skyward towards the sunrise, where tomorrow is from, and said, "Aho, thank you." He slit the throat of this huge buffalo bull. As the bright red velvety blood went gushing out of the tear of the throat area and on to Mother Earth, he said, "Mother Earth, I let you drink the blood of life." Thank you, Maker, for answering my prayers. Whoever has stink feet, come step into the blood, and the bad smell will be no more. Everybody was happy and laughing, free from the abusive control of the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, on which they depended for their rations.
The men jumped in to help, but Bear Ground was the mastermind in cutting the buffalo bull. The massive bull was square on his back, while young men were holding all his legs. A sharp knife finally slashed the still warm brisket, appearing as Bear Ground cut through the breastbone. The whole of the brisket was exposed, cut in half. Bear Ground cut a chunk from the steaming, warm, greasy, whitish brisket, also held it toward where the sun rises and said, "Oh ho, I will now grease the edges of my mouth." He rubbed the greasy brisket at the edges of his mouth, then ate a bit of it. This is our way of first touching the dead buffalo. And we eat only what we kill, not something that dies. On its own. The buffalo appeared to be truly gone after the killing of the buffalo bull near Crow Agency, until one silent night under the stars when the Upsau Loka were in a Native American church or peyote meeting along the Bighorn River in Montana. It was at Bear all of the time's home, and in the quiet silence of the main smoke, somewhere in the night's middle, an announcement was heard. Bear all the time was praying with tobacco in a corn shuck as the prayer and smoke entered the sacred fire, smoke to ascend toward the many stars of the peaceful night sky, and a spirit voice said, Bisha kun dok kuk, the buffalo are returning. Everyone heard the voice come from behind the meeting's lodge, off towards where the sun sets, and all were happy but stunned because the buffalo had been gone for over 80 winters. And how could they return? There were many light-eyed people and many spotted buffalo. How could it be? But the spirit voice was trustworthy. In the moon, when the choke cherries ripen, August, and the nights become cool just before the moon, when the sun is in the same September, Robbie Yellowtail of the Whistling Water clan and superintendent of Crow Agency would announce his decision to bring some buffalo from Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho to turn loose upon the Crow Indian Reservation's Montana Bighorn Mountains.
Although these buffalo, reintroduced in 1934, would eventually be killed off because of greedy ranchers who wanted the buffalo grass and labeled our herd with brucellosis, the Upsaloka would not be deterred from bringing back the buffalo. And in 1972, a replacement herd was brought from Theodore Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota to the Bighorn Mountains. And in 1980, I myself helped transplant 27 more buffalo from park to the mountains. Today, due to the above restoration efforts and others, the buffalo eat the buffalo grass in the Upsalowaka buffalo pasture, and we grease the edges of our mouths with their meat. The tongues of these mighty buffalo are given to respectable women of the Upsalowaka, as in the best winters on the trail of the buffalo. Many Upsalowaka use hearts that are good because we have felt the soul of life that returned to our people with the reintroduction of the buffalo. Our hearts beat as one with the buffalo and Mother Earth.
When the buffalo guns quit shattering the peace of the prairie with death at the turn of the century, there were very few survivors. An estimated 26 animals remained within the US borders, and perhaps some 500 in what would become Canada. The animals had watched their 50 million relatives disappear and had hidden away. Today, there are two herds that are direct genetic descendants of the original herds, the buffalo herds at Wood Buffalo National Park in Canada and Yellowstone National Park in the United States. These herds are arguably critical to any buffalo restoration efforts. Spiritually, Native people maintain that these are the elders. The Wood Buffalo herd is presently estimated to consist of 3,500 animals, descendants of the northern variety of buffalo that survived the great massacres and plains buffaloes that were shipped to the park in 1925. Intermixing the northern variety of buffalo with the plains buffalo was controversial, but more controversial has been the fact that the plains buffalo introduced cattle-based diseases into the herds, and infected buffalo have been destroyed by the park officials. The government agencies that manage the herd have been accused of managing the disease poorly, slaughtering the animals to provide meat to local communities, destroying the herd's habitat, and losing animals by drowning by building a dam. The second most genetically important herd is the Yellowstone herd. Living on 2.2 million acres of national parkland, the land itself was promised as Indian territory by the US Congress, but in 1872 was seized from the Native people to create the Yellowstone National Park with a mission to protect Native species, thus allegedly assuring the survival of the Yellowstone buffalo. By the late 1800s, the Native people who lived in Yellowstone were forced from their lands within the park's boundaries and restricted to reservations. In 1902, 23 bison were counted in the Yellowstone herd. Bison from captive herds were introduced that year. Between 1915 and 1920, intermingling of the introduced and wild animals began. And after about 1921, they were pretty much one herd. The Yellowstone herd was the foundation of many of the domestically held herds in North America. Culls have been part of buffalo management practices in the park since 1902 in the interest of keeping the herd at what officials consider a sustainable level. To cull the herds, buffalo are hunted, captured, and slaughtered. The culls have increased with herd size, and in the winters of 1944 through 1997, they increased dramatically, affecting over 1,944 animals, or more slaughters than in the previous 20 years combined. This practice has drawn dramatic opposition from not only Native peoples, but environmentalists and animal rights activists nationally and internationally.
The Yellowstone herd, in general, these interim plans provided for agency personnel from Montana and the National Park Service to cooperatively shoot bison moving from Yellowstone National Park to Montana in order to achieve the objectives of protecting private property, providing for human safety, and maintaining Montana's brucellosis class-free status. Yellowstone Environmental Impact Statement, July 1997, the winter of 1996-97, chilled indigenous peoples across the Great Plains to the bone. The harsh winter had already caused a very large natural die-off among the Yellowstone buffalo and forced the surviving buffalo out of the park to lower elevations in search of food. As they had crossed the invisible border between Yellowstone National Park and the state of Montana in search of winter foraging ground, they were targeted for slaughter. Some of them were captured, penned, and sold for meat, while others were shot on both public and private lands. Some 1,100 buffalo were killed by government agencies. The total estimated herd as the following spring was just 1,700 animals, down from 3,436 in September of 1996. The fear that the buffalo would infect cattle with brucellosis is said to be the driving force in the Yellowstone buffalo kill. However, there has never been a single documented case of transmission of brucellosis from the wild buffalo to cattle, including the 40 years that buffalo and cattle grazed side by side in Wyoming. Plus, the much larger Yellowstone elk herd, which numbers over 200,000 by many estimates, is known to be widely infected with brucellosis, but has not been the subject of a public slaughter except by the lucrative hunting industry.
Brucella abortus. Brucella abortus originated from domestic cattle and has infected most of the wild herds. Most domestic herds are brucellosis free. Buffalo themselves seem to survive with the disease, only limited long-term impact. First discovered in the early part of the century, the disease in some cases can cause miscarriages. Transmission of the disease can only occur in limited ways, primarily through direct contact with contaminated aborted fetuses, birth membranes, uterine fluids, or vaginal discharges from the infected animals. Ingestion of contaminated material is the primary route of infection. According to
Brucella abortus originated from domestic cattle and has infected most of the wild herds. Most domestic herds are brucellosis free. Buffalo themselves seem to survive with the disease, with only limited long-term impact. First discovered in the early part of the century, the disease in some cases can cause miscarriages. Transmission of the disease can only occur in limited ways, primarily through direct contact with contaminated aborted fetuses, birth membranes, uterine fluids, or vaginal discharges from infected animals. Ingestion of contaminated material is the primary route of infection. According to Margaret Meyer, a former professor of veterinary medicine at the University of California, Davis, and a leading authority on brucellosis, a bison would practically have to abort in a cow's face to pass it on. Plus, to Yellowstone environmental impact statement data, it is likely that less than 10% of the Yellowstone buffalo actually harbor brucellosis, what Intertribal Bison Cooperative Executive Director Mark Heckert calls a political disease. It is this incongruity between science and politics that has driven a good portion of the public debate and the direct action taken by some to oppose the killing of buffalo. The Yellowstone slaughter is ostensibly about buffalo versus cattle, that age-old mythological conflict between Indians and cowboys. Yellowstone itself is a national park that was established for beauty, not viability. Buffalo, on the other hand, are a serve yourself sort of critter. They will forage for food and they will survive. They will roam. Put that survival instinct up against cattle, national politics, and a rigid, invisible border, and you get the picture. The problem is that agency officials have allowed cattle to graze on the park, grazing allotment, attractive land adjoining Yellowstone, as well as other areas outside the park, which are actually administratively designated for wildlife use. Some opponents of the Yellowstone kill are working to have the regulations enforced. Others propose removing the cattle from any possible conflict area, expanding the grazing lands, and if necessary, as a last-ditch effort, removing the wild animals in intact family units. By the fall of 1998, over 65,000 comments had been received by the National Park Service on their environmental impact statement, which proposed to continue with lethal management practices. The so-called preferred alternative is a sort of potpourri of ideas, heavily dominated by a sense that those who have guns should make public policy. The federal proposal at present includes a very limited acquisition of some lands and continued lethal management with no provisions for live removal of the future herd. It is not surprising that over 4/5 of Montana's agricultural income from livestock and livestock products comes from cattle and calf sales. Cows are king in Montana, and many of the ranchers don't do poorly either. The average net worth of a Montana rancher is $800,000. Put that figure up against the hefty public subsidy figure for most of the public rangelands, and the irony becomes apparent. However, cattle interests directly impacted by the buffalo herd and Yellowstone are few. It is estimated that there are between 1,800 and 2,000 buffalo cow-calf pairs north of the park, and 900 to 1,000 cow-calf pairs in the West Yellowstone area. In contrast, nearby Gallatin County has about 27,000 beef cows, and Park County about 3,570 beef cows. Those cows deemed to be possibly affected by wild buffalo constitute less than 10% of the two counties' combined beef cattle population, which is less than 0.1% of the state's cattle population. This also includes all those cattle grazing on public land adjacent to the park and directly competing with bison on public land. Basically, all this buffalo killing is in honor of 3,000 or so cows and their babies who continue to graze on public land, land actually designated first for wildlife and only secondly for livestock.
Healing the community, healing the Buffalo Nation. Those of our ancestors who survived in the 19th century found sanctuary on the reservations. In 1894, the last wild buffalo herd in the United States, about 20 head, found sanctuary in Yellowstone Park. Like us, they are the last survivors. Caleb Shields, tribal chairman of Assiniboine and Sioux Nations, Fort Peck Reservation, Montana. Rosalie Little Thunder's work is about spiritual healing. It is also about saving buffalo. Rosalie's arrest came at Yellowstone. It was March 5th, 1997. A group of 75 people, including Lakota spiritual leader Arvol Looking Horse, congregated around 147 brucellosis negative bison in a holding corral. They shared a pipe and prayers for the buffalo and released the spirit of the buffalo that were killed before. During their lunch break, they heard the shots. The Department of Livestock had killed 8 buffalo a mile north of them. Rosalie and several others wanted to go to the site and pray. Government officials warned them about arrests and for trespassing on privately held land, and Rosalie Little Thunder was arrested, handcuffed, and placed in a patrol vehicle on charges of trespassing. The scene was a replay for some, particularly Rosalie and Evelyn Ironcloud of Pine Ridge. It was that deja vu feeling that you've been here before. Rosalie Little Thunder says, the slaughter was really devastating to not only Buffalo Nation, but to the
Healing the community, healing the Buffalo Nation.
But Emily, can you hear me? Can you hear me, bud? Because I think she's not hearing us, so she's repeating, right?
Yes, I'm so sorry. Please excuse me.
That's okay. Coffee covered that ground.
Could you scroll down, please?
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
No, no worries.
Is that good?
Yes. The slaughter was really devastating, not only Buffalo Nation, but to the Indian nations as well, explains Evelyn Ironcloud. We believe that the way they treated the buffalo is the way they treat the Indians. Many Native people view the historic Yellowstone slaughter cuts to the quick of the Lakota and other buffalo cultures of the Great Plains. Rosalie is a beautiful Lakota grandmother who has been an educator, longtime political activist, artist, and board member of the 7th Generation Fund and the Honor the Earth Fund, both national Native foundations. She was arrested in the winter of 1997, and she prayed for the buffalo spirits that they would go peacefully amidst the slaughter at Yellowstone. She remembered the story her father told her about the Little Thunder Massacre, which occurred in September 1855 in Nebraska. She's speaking slowly and deliberately, as if deep inside herself. It was when they first started the hunts for the Indians. In 1851, the first Fort Laramie treaty sessions had taken place. My dad's oral history talked about it. They were camped down by the North Platte River on the north bank. They still lived in that area. Rosalie then refers to the chief at that time, whose name was also Little Thunder. Then that General Harney came, the one that Peake's named after. Little Thunder went out to meet him with the truce flag, and he met him, and he fed him salt pork and hardtack. That's what they had to eat then.
I listen to her and begin to shake, writing as best I can as the story unfolds. There was a grandma there. That grandma had her 10-year-old grandson with her. She said to him, "Stay here, don't come out yet." And she laid her shawl over him and hid him in the bushes by the tall grass. They started shooting down the people then. And when she was shot, she threw herself on her shawl on top of that little boy. That way she hid him. That little boy, he was my grandfather. The oral history is passed on as Rosalie retells the story. He remembered his grandmother's blood dripping through the shawl onto him. He said he stayed there until there was no sound. He and the surviving members went back to Pine Ridge on foot. Close to 70 people were killed there. Then comes Rosalie's addition to the oral history. This was so strange. That's what the whole scene was when they were killing the buffalo. That was what was coming back to me. I had my 10-year-old grandson standing next to me. And they started killing the buffalo, just like that, shooting them down. I covered his face with my shawl. I told him to go move. It was the same story. 100 years later, you get the sense that nothing changed from 1855 to 1997. Actually, that time span is just a clap of thunder in our history. It's not that long. Rosalie Little Thunder has a dream. Not only does she want to stop the slaughter of the Yellowstone herd, she wants to see those buffalo back on the land, at Yellowstone and national grasslands, and with the buffalo peoples. By 2003, the Yellowstone herd will likely return to its size prior to the big slaughter of 1996. And Rosalie Little Thunder and others believe that preserving the herd and allowing them the space they need will be the key to the viability of the rest of the buffalo. And then the last line under the highlight says, after all, they are the survivors. And this is where this reading for today will end. But we are going to be learning about the Buffalo Commons next week, which is very interesting. Yeah, and there's some images here of Rosalie. A quote from her: remind yourself every morning, every morning, every morning, I'm going to do something. I've made a commitment, not for yourself, but beyond yourself. You belong to the collective. Don't go wandering off or you will perish. Rosalie Little Thunder, Lakota, Buffalo Field Campaign co-founder. And then the next image is I thought was a beautiful artwork. So Rosalie has started these walks, in honor of the Yellowstone herd to raise awareness. And she would walk for hundreds of miles carrying the sacred pipe. And they still do these walks every year. Now it's in memoriam to her. And this is the artwork. If you go down a little, Emily, you can see, I just thought it was really beautiful piece of work. And then there's some images as well. Okay, I'm going to share a video that might help processing and connecting with the movement Rosalie started.
we don't believe that life begins at birth and ends with death, but our spirit lives again and again. When we talk about Buffalo people, we're not talking about Buffalo and Lakota separately. It's all one. Our creation stories, our origin, says that we come from the buffalo. That's no different than believing you come from the monkey or from Adam and Eve. Naturally, they would become very central to our spirituality.
My name is Arvo Looking Horse. I'm the keeper of Sacred Pipe of the Nakota Nation, 19th generation, and I am a spiritual leader, and I wear headdress for the people. So I'm here to pray for peace and harmony upon Mother Earth, and to walk with prayers for the health of the first people, the Buffalo people. That's who we are, and the Buffalo today, our relatives, to pray for their health and their well-being. So that's what we are here for, is to pray.
What's really sad about today is that, we call National Day of Prayer because we feel a lot of these buffalo have died without proper ceremony, without surrendering their spirits, as we believe they have to do. And just a mile or so down the road, they're shooting them at the very same time. And, it just presents an extreme contrast, to our value in wildlife, as opposed to the state of Montana. Going from the ceremony to this scene, it's very chilling. The callousness that some parts of humanity have towards, the buffalo. We're not quitting, definitely, because we just can't allow this to happen anymore.
How old do you have to be to get arrested? How old do you have to be to get arrested? Yes. That's the spirit. You don't need to handcuff her!
You know what leadership is when everybody steps back and you don't, so you're up front. It's reluctant leadership, but it comes, you know you're facing a huge challenge. Mike, I came across him basically documenting this slaughter, and we ended up starting up at first we called it Buffalo Nations, and then Buffalo Field, it morphed into Buffalo Field Campaign. I really appreciate the presence of Buffalo Field Campaign. They've been very effective in their job, but the Native people are trying to do something else. There's so much connection in our history, our existence, our origin, our future. We share that inseparable destiny with the buffalo. Our prophecy says, as long as there are buffalo, we will survive. The slaughter's been happening, and I think people are very deeply concerned about it, but have no way of expressing that concern.
any action of substance. And so I think this walk is providing that for a lot of people. I think we have a lot to say about this. We are not driven by economics or politics. All we're concerned about is that this herd survive. The pipe in this buffalo hide wrapping was what the bundle was, what's been referred to as the sacred bundle. It wasn't that the bundle itself had any power, but people who carried it in prayer. And so that's what we took, is basically prayers. People's prayers through the buffalo. It was very hard, but in a way, I think it made its mark on all of us. The buffalo are important to us. We're not just saying this. This is what we can do, you know. It's how deeply we care. We have a relationship with the buffalo that it sustains us, but we owe not only the buffalo but the earth quite a bit. And so I think a lot of it is not about what we get, our treaty rights, but what we have to give back. And, you know, we have ceremonies that are very mindful of taking care of the spirit of the buffalo. We don't believe that life begins at birth and ends with death, but our spirit lives again and again, and that the spirit of the buffalo, once the body is dead, the spirit must be tended to, and that, you know, it lives again. It's a cycle. And so, you know, with hundreds and hundreds of our relatives going to slaughter, it's very disturbing because their spirits aren't tended to, and they're trapped, and they can't live again. We have a relationship and an obligation. These relatives don't ever forget their obligation. They know their purpose. Human beings have forgotten theirs. And when we send our relatives to slaughter, human beings send them to slaughter for no good reason. You know, we have to at least help remind those human beings that make decisions. You know, this is very careless, a very careless thing to do. When as human beings, you know, we don't dare to think that we know everything, that we're in charge of managing, because we always make a mess of that. You know, and it's a big mess right now. Our ego thinks that everything is here for us, but it isn't. We're kind of out of whack with natural law. We just have to remind each other, remind ourselves, you know, that we have obligations. You know, remind ourselves we're just humble human beings that tend to make a mess of everything, you know, but that we need to pay attention to other beings that understand natural law. And the work, you know, at Yellowstone is still there, always there. It's a titanic struggle, you know, between humanity and the earth. We have to go back to another way of thinking and another way of living.
We have to reconnect, to heal our nation.
Oof. This one gets me emotional. Um, I have a few guiding questions, but I'm also totally open to just hearing your reflections and feelings, encountering this material, encountering Rosalie and the story of the Yellowstone herd. But a couple of questions for me, and I'll of course put them in the chat, that came up is one was thinking about the knowledge that comes from dreams. I've noticed a lot of the stories I'm reading from Native American people about the bison involve prophecy dreams. And I was just wondering if any of you all have experienced this kind of dreaming, or if you think that that form of knowledge is valued enough in our society. I guess is kind of a loaded question. But, and then the other thing that came up for me reading this story was thinking about the national park model of conservation, and how we might rethink that model. And lastly, I was so perplexed by this political disease, as one person put it, of the brucellosis, being so rarely transferred from the wild herds to cattle, and yet used as this primary reasoning for culling the herds to an extreme level. And then I also was like, why are they more threatened by the wild buffalo than the large wild elk herds? You know, that actually have been shown to carry this disease more prevalently. So that was just something that was perplexing to me, and I thought I would put it out there. And I will put those questions in the chat, but like I said, there's so much more to that I'm not even able to articulate.
As we thinking about the reflection questions that Kelly put up, I also wanted to uplift the work about or from Buffalo Field Campaign, what they're doing today since their founding with Rosalie Little Thunder. Today they have kind of three main focuses. One is doing field patrols, legal advocacy, and then scientific studies. Buffalo Field Campaign has volunteers that go out every day documenting bison and watching for signs of harassment, abuse, and slaughter. They're intervening directly, especially when it comes with government agents who are harassing the cattle or other wildlife, and also documenting the evidence as well. They're gathering footage, data, and documenting these observations for scientific study. The volunteers actually also go out and put out signs warning motorists on highways of the presence of buffalo to slow down and also be careful of them and just be aware of animals as well. They've also been working with local landowners to create buffalo safe zones in neighboring areas with the park by putting up posting no hunting signs as well. And with their legal advocacy work, they're really trying to get the Yellowstone buffalo herd to be listed as an endangered or threatened species under the Endangered Species Act to ensure greater protection. And they've got also a campaign to repeal Montana's a law that was passed in 1995 that using the fear of Brucet Solis to stop the migration of the buffalo, which eventually led the governor of Montana to actually sue Yellowstone with the state statute to stop the migration of the bison outside of the park boundaries, and which ended up creating the Interagency Bison Management Plan, which is the kind of agency responsible for this is state, federal, and tribes who are participating in kind of joint decision making. And that plan was solidified in 2000, and now it's actually going through a renewal process where the National Park Services is asking for had just recently actually closed a public comment period for their proposed new plans for what to do. And the NPS actually has kind of three courses of actions for what they're proposing to do with the plan itself: to take no action at all, and which would be kind of course number one, which is to maintain the status quo, which is working with tribes to relocate or the brucellosis free bison to travel lands, and also diverting or the bison that do come off of the park boundaries are hunted by tribes in the ceremony, and as well as non-native hunters as well. The second pathway is to enhance restoration and tribal engagement to manage a herd of about 4,500 to 6,000 bison, and they'll be working more closely with tribes to kind of meet to fit the needs of what the tribes are looking for. And then option number three is the kind of food limited carrying capacity, which is to rely on natural selection and public travel culling in Montana as primarily tool of regulating the herd to about 5,500 to about 8,000. And the Buffalo Field Campaign has obviously been really involved in urging to kind of create this plan, this new plan, and actively been campaigning for their own kind of advocacy on what to do. And they're mainly putting forward the scientific data that the cases of brucellosis it's kind of a non-issue and doesn't really threaten the nearby cattle, and asking for management program that would kind of mirror what's going on with the elk as well. And so this is a little bit brief highlight on what they're doing right now, and kind of carrying on the legacy of Rosalie Little Thunder. The organization is now headed by a gentleman by the name of James Holt, who's of the Nez Perce tribe. The reservation as well has had has had positions within the tribe and also having to relocate the tribes back into the reservation system as well.
Thank you so much for that, Kavi. I feel like it was really necessary because what we read was just like an opening history, and that really brings us up to the moment where this work is still going on. And yeah, I know it's a complicated thing, but
Maybe this sounds a little bit naive, but I think that looking at it from a holistic perspective, it has a lot to do with profit and ranchers, even though I think in our reading we said the average rancher is earning about $800,000. I mean, it seems very minimal, but to me, it all comes back to who are they supplying this cattle to? Where is it going? Who's demanding the cattle? If there's no demand, then, I mean, maybe again, that's kind of a naive way of looking at it, but really it is sort of basically, if you look at it in a holistic way, I think definitely have to consider who's demanding these cattle, who's demanding this food product. Also, I know that bison are bred for, I mean, I see bison meat in the market. I know I'm just curious, like when they are slaughtered, what becomes of the buffalo, the actual being itself do you know, Kavi?
Yeah, I was actually looking into this today, and from the bison or like the buffalo meat that's sold commercially, it's actually a hybrid of a bison cattle, and so like that's being raised for the meat itself. But I'm not sure in terms of who's doing the ranching of those animals or where that's happening as well.
Yeah, in that respect.
Hey, this is Jasmine. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, for me, everything correlates to teaching children. That's what I do. And having these conversations with children, because children are, you know, even my students who are 10 and 12 are very conscious of the spirit of animals. They're still in some ways connected in that way, especially ages younger than that. So I always make that correlation about education, about really knowing what it is we demand in our grocery stores and where does it come from and what are the consequences of eating those things. So for me, it kind of has a lot to do with education.
Yeah, what you said about the grocery store meat reminded me of a documentary that I watched about buffalo. Forget the name of it, but it's on Netflix. And it was pretty informative. But my takeaway on that particular point was that the buffalo that are bred for meat are genetically very different from the buffalo that originally ranged on the prairie. The animals are a lot smaller and they've been selected for traits that are easier to manage by ranchers, like that they don't jump over fences, different things like that. But yeah, it's almost like a totally different animal from the original buffalo. And I really love all of Kelly's questions. There's so much I feel like that comes up for me for all of those. With the political Sorry, I think I'm back. With the political disease, like my mind goes to the fact that so many of the landowners and ranch owners are conservative white men, and they've been practicing this livelihood for generations, and it's really difficult to like change the mind of someone like that. So I would venture to guess that that's just what they were taught, that it was a real threat to their herd, and it's difficult to get them to see otherwise. Yeah, I'll pass to anyone else who wants to chime in.
I've been thinking a lot about how when a threat is identified, the thinking gets calcified or gets narrowed. So when there isn't a threat, when everything's on the table as being a possibility of rethinking how we're working with something, there's more and possibility that gets generated from that. So the idea of so living in a farming community, as I do most of the week, is there's these kind of these really quick and inaccurate threats that are identified around why certain things are happening, and then it just people become embattled around something really fast, as opposed to discussing and redesigning an approach. And so that's really hard to undo. And so I've been studying this kind of just informally, living where I do, where there's something that's an easy blame for something. And so I think that's what holds conservation in arrested development from becoming something that can actually do what it wants to do.
Thanks for your sourcing of the video of Rosalie Little Thunder, Kelly. I was really moved by her presence and like just being able to feel that deep sense of interconnected destiny with the bison, and that sort of embodied by her walk, the 500-mile walk, and the sort of seriousness and humility of that walk, with that horn or bone or whatever she had wrapped up, carrying with her. And I don't know, there was something very shamanistic that came across in that film about the transfer of energy from the buffalo to the piece of the buffalo that she carried in her arms, almost like a child, all that distance. And then that she was surrounded almost by a herd of people with her, like a herd-sized group going with her. It was very moving. It made me think about what the difference between a dream or a vision, or how intuition works. Like, I think a lot of times one thinks that intuition or inspiration is like kind of like butterflies that fly around and land somewhere. But I think it's part of a deep practice of interconnectedness, where people don't possess originality any more than they possess anything. And that idea of, the idea that a burial needs to happen, honoring the passing of life in order to free the spirit to continue. I don't know, it's something that makes me think about this whole idea of the prairies, because the prairies also are a life like the bison, but they don't have eyes, and it makes it the prairie. I think that when things have eyes, it's easier for us to relate to them. But I feel like we still, in order to understand what's not here at the range of the bison, also have to understand the destruction of the prairies and the grasslands that were in that dream state with the bison and the indigenous people that lived with them. So it's all connected. Everything is so connected, and it's so hard to tell these stories, but I felt like the combination of the film tonight and the reading and the sense of earnest, purposeful, directed walking was really, really beautiful. I'm really happy that that film was made and that you found it for us. Olan, could we do a little sounding?
Well, we can prepare for it. Doug's computer crashed. He's been trying to get it back up. What we could do in preparation for it, though, is just to check everybody's volume level, just so that we have it technically beautiful. So if you go to the little microphone icon and hit the arrow that's pointing up, and then go to audio settings, and you'll see input level, and have the button just a little below halfway. Yay, he has returned.
How about the output level?
Doug, what do you think about the output level? Where is the output level?
I'm sorry, was that
Yeah,
question
so
for me?
that should be about halfway too. Thanks. And the thing that, a couple of things that really impressed me tonight. For one, the intensely blood and meat of our being alive, and the buffalo's life, and that very graphic description of it being tended to in a holy way, but still it so hits the mortal button. And the sense of that when she said that the bundle doesn't have power, it's the intent of the people that have power, and that reconnecting to life is what's healing. And so we have that opportunity, just in a simple way, to reconnect with each other with a sensitivity that might be healing. And I'm thinking, even though I was not raised in a culture with ceremony or an understanding of a relation to animals in that way, I'm sure we all felt something visceral from the description of the buffalo's lives and deaths. And to just hold that as we're connecting with singing with each other. And please try and sing if you haven't done it for a while. There is a natural herd instinct for how to make beautiful music together. So I'll just start something, and then Emily, will you back me up? And then everybody just join after that. And we have our systems working. So I'll just find a little something to sing, and then Emily and then everyone just sing along. So hold on a second. Oh,